Welcome to the lighter side of the spectrum, the podcast that celebrates the multiple hats we wear and the juggling acts we perform in life. Whether you're parenting kids and teens on the autism spectrum, navigating the ever-evolving healthcare industry, or building a more inclusive and impactful world, this is your space to find connection, inspiration, and growth. Together, we'll share stories, tackle challenges, and explore how innovation and inclusion create better outcomes for everyone. Because no matter the spectrum, there's always a lighter side. Now here's your host, David Kaufer.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the lighter side of the spectrum. You know, there are few organizations that have done more to protect the rights of students with disabilities than the Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates, or otherwise known as COPAA. Their mission, ensuring equal education opportunities for all students, has been a lifeline for countless families navigating the maze of special education law. Today, we're joined by Denise Marshall, COPAA's Executive Director since 2005. Denise has spent over 3 decades fighting for the rights and dignity of people with disabilities. From her work at the Kennedy Krieger Institute to TASH, and now through COPAA's national leadership. We're going to talk about what's working, what's not, and what it takes to create change that lasts, particularly in this challenging environment, from the classroom to Capitol Hill. With all that, thank you, Denise. Welcome to the lighter side of the spectrum.
Well, thank you, David. I'm so happy to be here and appreciate the invite.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you. I really love the work that you've done. You guys have a really great and useful website with some great resources that I found helpful that we'll definitely link to. But one of the things, why don't we kind of start with your origin story? You know, we talked a little bit about that before we started, but you spent more than 30 years now in this space. What first drew you into disability rights advocacy?
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to be in my early 20s working on a project through Kennedy Krieger Institute, which was the first of its kind, a national demonstration project on positive behavior supports. So I would go into, at that time, both schools and homes of students whose challenging behaviors were really threatening their placements in either or sometimes both, and work with their families, educators to keep them where they were and to help them understand the child and figure out what would work in a positive, supportive way. One of the first boys that I worked with was a 3rd grader. He had autism, and his favorite thing to do was flap his hands in front of his face, as well as run through the school past all the blinds, so that, you know, he got this sensation going.
Yeah, sure.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
Sensory
So,
input.
and
Yeah.
he was fully included, but his teachers thought, yeah, they just sort of put him in the background or set him aside and thought, well, he'll get whatever he gets from this. And so as I was observing him, of course, part of my job was to change that. I noticed that he was listening to a book on tape. And the teacher said, yeah, he's not really listening. He just puts it on fast forward. And so I kept watching, and I realized he was putting it on fast forward, but in perfect timing with whatever was on the page. So I could, as he went to press fast forward, it
So
would
he was
start to
following.
read that page. So he was following it in his way. And when I showed that to the teachers, light bulbs went off, and they were like, whoa. And they went off for me too. And we were,
Sure.
by the time he left elementary school, he was speaking, participating. He had some jobs to do, like go around the whole school and open the blinds so that, pull them up, put them down at the end of the day. So we tried to integrate the things he wanted to do into his schedule. And what a difference it made for everybody that was involved in the experience in the classroom, and at home. So that was really the first thing that got me going. And I
What a
started
great
doing,
story.
yeah, I started doing lots of workshops for families and for educators. And that's what led me to work for TASH, which is focused on inclusion of the most challenging students or adults to serve, and making sure that they have, the best life possible. And through that experience, I was so fortunate to meet so many incredible people. Doug Bicklin, who really pioneered the typing approach to communication. Tyler Fee, who was one of
Hmm.
his students and began typing and now speaks, and is, so we were able to work together. I was able to work together with them. Paula Cluth, I mean, I could go on and on. June Downing, who really worked on literacy. So my world was kind of put upside down. And during that time, I got married and had my own children. My son did have an IEP for speech related issues. And then now I have a grandson with Down syndrome who is 12. So
Oh, okay. So
on
I mean, you've been living it in many different forms over the years.
Exactly. Yep. And always passionate about that. And, people sometimes say to me, well, but COPA, how did you make that transition from TASH, which really says all means all and all kids need to be included in their home school, to COPA that really looks at the bigger spectrum? And I say, look, I mean, I still believe that all kids can be at some point, if they have the right skills and the right supports,
Support, right?
and the right learning, the right environment, all those things. But there are also times in some students' lives where that's not possible, and the law provides for that. And so private placements or sometimes private schools have been lifelines for many students with disabilities and their families. So I
Including
still
ours.
work,
Yeah,
yeah, so I
absolutely.
still work towards that ideal where the schools have the ability to serve more diverse kids, but recognize that, what individual kids need is sometimes different.
Well, it sounds like that background kind of set you up perfectly for this role because you were kind of in the front lines, right? In terms of really understanding what inclusion looks like, what it could, how it could work, maybe some of the challenges that are involved with it that even parents may not realize, over the years. I would think that that's served you well now.
Oh, absolutely. And I think also because TASH was a membership organization, as is COPA. So I also began to learn, along with my values and my passion for the content and for the mission, I also began to learn the business side of running an association and
Right.
gathering members and doing all the things that we do to fuel, as we call it, fuel the fight.
Yeah, so let's talk about COPA a little bit more, maybe for some of our listeners and viewers who aren't familiar with the organization. Why don't you talk about, I mean, I kind of glanced over the core mission, but why don't you get into that a little deeper in terms of, why you exist, what your wins are, kind of what your days look like in terms of what you're fighting for.
Sure. So COPA, we like to say we are where the movement for education equity gains its strength. And we do that by uniting advocates of all forms to defend the civil rights of students with disabilities and their families, ensuring that nobody's going through that difficult educational journey by themselves. Across the country, we know many families are navigating the a journey, and they're the ones who have to take that step when the schools are failing to meet their obligations. So we have been training and cultivating advocates to walk beside them, to be with them at the IEP meetings, to help them understand very complicated law. We've got incredible attorneys who bring an unmatched expertise about special education law, the intention of the law, the the court decisions that shape the law, and all of those things that go into the struggle for civil rights. So we think that COPA is a place again for people to gather and to gain strength and to renew and recommit to the struggle. We have about 3,700 members across the country,
Oh, wow.
parents, students, advocates, attorneys, and allied professionals. We have a number of people who are speech language pathologists or behavior specialists or psychologists or anyone who's really committed to uphold children's rights and families' rights and create environments where every student is seen, supported, and set up to thrive. The only people that we currently do not allow as members are educators or people who work more than 50% of their time for a school district. And that is because we also uh, address a very important part of the law, which are due process rights. Anytime a child is removed from the general education classroom, then that is in itself a form of, can be seen as a form of segregation that
Yeah.
the team has made the decision to do. And like I said, I'm absolutely not questioning that it's necessary, but from a civil rights perspective, anytime you are denied the rights that other people enjoy on the basis of your disability, there needs to be a way to challenge that. And the due process system that's part of the IDEA and also involved in Section 504. Those are both very important avenues for families to do that. So we are, at the forefront of that struggle as well. We do not, however, do advocacy on the individual or case by case level, only on systemic issues. And then also, as I said, we provide training and we do amicus briefs in the courts. We are involved in
Oh,
some
interesting.
systemic litigation. So yeah, we write about 21 amicus briefs a year on issues to help shape the body of case law that protects students with disabilities and their family.
That's great. And I want to get into that in a little bit, particularly as we talk about communication rights, and kind of like a communication bill of rights, which is a movement that we're starting to see across the country, which is great for non-speakers. As we had mentioned, given the community that I participate in primarily with Stone and his peers. But I want to talk a little bit about, IDEA and ADA and the protections that are afforded, because again, I think that I don't think parents necessarily understand them very well. And I don't think there's a lot of work that's done on the educational side of things to help parents understand that. And I was just wondering if you could touch on that in terms of how are you seeing that change or not change over the years?
Well, definitely, I think over the years, I think people have a better understanding than they did, but there's no doubt that, when a family first receives the diagnosis and are struggling with their child, that the immediate need is around the disability diagnosis, perhaps, or the things that they need to do for their and with their child. Over time, typically a family goes through the process, has those experience, learns what strategies work, learns what strategies don't. They might be involved in a local parent uh, support group or
Hmm.
other things, and then they come or become aware of, or maybe come to a place like COPA where they can not only strengthen their skills further, but then begin to help other people. So when I first started at COPA, there were not special education advocates, or if there was a very few. That was 20 years ago. So we have grown that field exponentially, and we continue to commit to do that. The IDEA says that parents can bring anybody with expertise to them to the meeting, expertise or knowledge of the child to the meeting. We are committed to making sure that that right stands, and that although we are, like I said, working to train advocates or attorneys, parents are not limited to either of those options. Sometimes they're necessary, but I think that parents are stronger now, and people are able to share information more freely now, and they're connected. I know people are connected on social media. They're learning more about their rights. But yet there are still families that come to us and say, I wish I had known this sooner. So we still have work to do to get the word out there to help people understand how to best advocate at the individual level, and then what steps they can take towards resolution should things not be going well.
Yeah, and advocacy takes a lot of different levels, and it's I think it's so important because it is you do feel so isolated as a parent, I think, once you kind of get into the system. But as you said, there's a lot more resources available for parents today than there were even 5 or 10 years ago. Um, but
But oh, go ahead. I'm
yeah, I
sorry.
was just saying, but it's so important to have that because as a parent, just speaking, as a parent and kind of going navigating those waters, you alluded to this earlier, Denise, when you're talking about like you're dealing with everything else too. You're usually dealing with other health challenges and
Mhm.
there's so many other things that you're trying to juggle that you simply there's just not time in the day to become an expert or not even an expert, just even super knowledgeable about what those rights are. Hey, Stone. Happy, happy. Happy, happy. Happy. So it's critical. I think it's just that's why I love that you're training advocates. We need more of that, more attorneys or just advocates. Again, people who could sit by the parents and the students to help fight for these rights that are their rights. That we're not asking for anything above and beyond.
Exactly. Yeah. One thing I will caution people on in this age of information is, just like you hear many others say, especially around artificial intelligence, which anytime you type something into Google, that's what you're using. They'll quickly search the web and pull up information. Oftentimes it's accurate, but sometimes it's not. So you really have to read the articles that it links to and educate yourself about what it is, what was the point of that article, and is that, can you find it in more than one place, which
And
can
the
often.
source, right? The source
Yeah,
is
yeah.
important.
And that's one of the things that people will often say about COPA is because we have that expertise in there, and we're able to, people feel confident when they come to our conferences, participate in training or have discussions with longtime members or some of our legal director, Celine Amazon, they know that information is reliable and accurate. And that is, at the state level, that can also come from your state protection and advocacy organization or your parent information and training center. There are places that you can also check in on some of the information that you may be reading or relying on.
And does every state have a reliable resource center like that in your experience, Denise? I don't know. Again, like I said, I'm in Washington State, so I can speak for, and many other states for other families I've connected with. I just don't know what the resource landscape is like for people out there.
Yeah. So every state has a protection and advocacy. Like here, they're usually they might be called uh, Disability Rights Washington or Disability Rights Maryland now. And there's a whole network of them, but they do not all focus on special education. I know that because sometimes because of funding sources. So yeah, it's not a guarantee that they will necessarily have the expertise there, but hopefully they can refer you out if not. And every state also has a parent information and training center, at least for now. They have been targeted by reduction for reduction in funding that we as a community have spoken out against and spoken up loud to say no, we need this resource. So for right now, I believe they've been funded for one more year, but that, every family should have access to that kind of training. And
Absolutely.
again, their skills and their knowledge can vary, but the resource should be there.
It's something, right? I mean, you got
Yeah.
to have something there. How are you concerned? And if you are concerned, Denise, about protections being eroded, some of the protections that have been fought for, the gains that have been made over the years with IDEA and ADA protections. Are you
Oh,
concerned
yeah,
about that right now?
I am. And I'll say one with a caveat. And one is that absolutely nothing has changed under the law right now. So those protections are still in force, and people need to continue to advocate for them vigorously. But I don't think you can deny that there are, I would find it hard for someone to deny that there's been a systemic attack or a systematic attack on the rights of individuals with disabilities, on diversity, inclusion, accessibility, on funding. There's been a lot of research around that's been cut. There's the Part D of the IDEA, although the secretary keeps saying no, there's been no reductions in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. That's simply not true because they have reduced and stopped funding of grants under the Part D, which is the part that funds the parent information and training centers, funds technical assistance centers, such as the deaf-blind one that was cut, and many, many research projects, which are critical for us to understand how to best support students. And also, even though the funding levels in the president's budget for Part B, which is um, what talks about education in the school years, have remained the same, the number of students with disabilities has gone up about 15%. So one could consider that a cut, which I do. And
Right.
so, you know, so yes, I think there's like I said, systematic weakening or diluting just all the rhetoric around, even the rhetoric around autism and how, yes, we know it affects people on different levels, um, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't, that their lives are horrific, or some of the other vitriol that's been coming out about it, because many people who communicate differently, who look different, who have different beliefs, are still, very important and valuable, and our job is to support who they are. And so, yeah, I think there are a number of concerns, but we also see the power of the collective voice of our community, and we need to continue to believe in that and to band together and raise our voices.
That was going to be one of my follow-up questions. There's always the, what can we do, right? And to your point, also, Denise, I just want to add that, I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, there's cuts even when it may not be an obvious cut. But one of the things that's bothered me so much about the rhetoric, particularly around autism, around RFK Jr., and the controversy that they've created is, for all the talk that they've tried to generate about the epidemic, quote unquote, of autism, and that this is such a huge issue and problem, and that really their only solution is to impact the vaccine schedule or cut the use of Tylenol. There's nothing directly related to supporting those who have been impacted. Like those, like if there is this impact, if there is a epidemic, what are you going to do about those impacted?
Right.
Like you're cutting
Well,
funds. Like you're not, you're doing the opposite. You're saying there's a problem, but instead of solving the problem, you're kind of creating a worse situation for families and for those impacted.
yeah, and I think that's part and parcel of all the actions so far, is that there've been a lot of proclamations without any substance, without any detail, without any information, like we're going to move all of IDEA to the Department of Health and Human Services.
Yeah,
Well,
what?
first of all, what does that mean? Second of all, how are
Happy,
they going to
happy,
ensure
happy,
that
happy.
people are still receiving the services they're entitled to? Third, how do you
There's
make
no
sure that
plan. There's
There's
no
no
plan.
plan, but how do IDEA doesn't exist in a vacuum. I mean,
Right.
there are many other federal laws and they all work together and they all have had the intention over the past 50 years to move us forward, not to put the clock back 50 years to when the Department of Ed or IDEA IDEA was just being written into law 50 years ago. But so it didn't necessarily, which is one of the reasons the Department of Education was created. So, um, I think that it's that heightens that sense of anxiety of ours is that we don't have any information to react to, but also we are not, unlike usual activities at the federal level, there are conversations. People are, invited in and they listen to the various perspectives and come up with a plan that everybody's comfortable with or that can move things forward. And we, have not seen any of that kind of dialogue to our knowledge. Only, people who agree with the statements or who are going to back them up are invited to speak. So it's
Yeah, I was
very
just
concerning.
Yeah, there's no coalition, so to speak, right? I don't think I've seen any proof of outreach or inclusion in terms of the organizations such as COPA and so many others that have been working in the space who understand it so well. I
Yeah.
again, I haven't seen any proof of that. And then I guess sometimes if you try to ask, those or the supporters, a lot of times I think what happens is, you may be lumped into the status quo, right? Like have you heard that, or have you kind of gotten that any of that perception, Denise? Like it's just kind of like lump everyone into this. Well, you're kind of part of the problem because like, there's all these issues and we just need to toss it all out.
Yeah. I mean, we've heard some of that, and we've probably heard it more through silence, meaning that
Mm,
we've tried to reach out and to get meetings, but we have
interesting.
also, we sued this administration last time around over the disproportionality regulations that the IDEA requires, which basically says if you see a disproportionate use of discipline in excluding kids with disabilities, kids who are black, kids who are brown, or a combination any thereof, then you have a responsibility and an obligation to do something about it. And you're supposed to use up to 15% of your early intervening funds to do that. And that administration at that time wanted to delay implementation of those regs. Again, maybe one of our first early indicators of how far they were going to go to really uh, attack the rights of students. At that time, we won a resounding victory at the Supreme Court level and said, no, you have to
Awesome.
implement them right now. So I know we're not on their favorite people list. And that's, it's unfortunate that it seems to make a difference because, as I said, I think I would still expect in a civil society that we'd be able to sit down and talk about some of these things and really figure out, you know, like I still can't figure out any reason to move IDEA under HHS. I just can't. So I'd like
No,
somebody to explain that to me.
no, I think you're right. And I have yet to see anyone even kind of try to explain it. Right? Like it's just kind of like this is
Yeah.
like we're gonna do this just
Yeah.
because.
We
Other
said we
than
were going to do it, so we're doing it. And that's kind of what it appears they're doing with the decimation of the Department of Ed and the firing of all the Office for Civil Rights staff and all of the people who provide technical assistance and who have the expertise of how to implement the law. They're just doing it, even though they know, and the secretary has said that it requires an act of Congress to close the Department of Ed or to move it. But they continue to move along those lines. Now there is court order prohibiting them from firing the department staff. So we'll see. I mean, one of the things you asked before about, what we can do. One of the things we're saying
Yeah.
is if, the Office for Civil Rights, which sits under the Department of Education, is responsible to investigate claims of discrimination and to do something about it. Even though we don't know how they could possibly do that with only 2 or 3 staff left in the department, we're
Holy
still,
cow.
yeah, we're still urging families, file your complaints, because the last thing that we want to see happen is them, someone to say, well, there were 20,000 last year, but now look, we
Mm.
closed the department and there were only 100. Look, we're so much better off.
That's
So,
a great point. Yeah. So yeah, that's a really great point. So yeah, don't stop filing. Don't stop the record keeping, all that documentation, all of that, just because there may be silence on the other end. That's a really good point, Denise. I hadn't thought
yeah,
of that. Right. Yeah.
yeah,
And then they just, yeah, they can use for justification. Look how much money we're saving. Look at, look how efficient we're being because all these claims have gone down.
right. And another area for recourse for families is to file a state complaint to the state.
Go sit. Yes.
um, File a state complaint to the State Department of Education, and that's something else you might want to consider, because depending on, again, states vary widely about on how they respond to those, but even if there's no one at the Department of Education, like I said earlier, the law still stands. States are still obligated to provide free and appropriate education for their students, and their state directors of special ed, and the Council of Administrators for Special Ed and the Council for Exceptional Children, who does most of the education teachers training, have all said that they need the Department of Education there to help them because they know that they're not equipped to handle this on the state level alone. But that's another avenue to document what the issues are within the states as well.
Yeah, that's great. Um, many of our listeners and my audience and just kind of my community are parents of non-speaking or, minimally speaking autistic kids who are gaining their voice through the use of letterboards or keyboards, methodologies like spelling to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
Many of them, including ourselves, have run into roadblocks at the school level because they will not allow for the use of letterboards. They cite ASHA's position.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to talk about, kind of get your perspective on that. Because again, I think you bring a unique perspective, again, from a national standpoint, not necessarily an outsider, but you're not, within the community, but you've been fighting for rights, for all
Yeah.
these years. So I just wanted to chat about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a real travesty. It's unfair to the students who are being denied something that could be helpful to them in the name of evidence base, I think, because that while there are some studies debunking the use of spelling, particularly the ones that uh, rely on a facilitator,
Right. The
to
early facilitated
yeah,
communications. Yeah.
yeah. But there are also studies that demonstrate the capability. And
100%.
as I think I said to you maybe before we got on, I'm not sure, maybe I said it after we're on, but I know people personally who have benefited from this type
Oh,
of
great.
communication, and who have, um, who we took a whole group of us to DC to advocate for their
Awesome.
rights. We tried to convince ASHA to back off of their position, and we weren't successful at that time. But um,
Can you talk about that a little bit, Denise? That piques my curiosity. So, how did you try to get ASHA? Like, what was your approach? I'm just
well,
curious.
we went with people who type independently now or
Yeah.
who speak, and said, look, you're denying uh, what students from accessing what they need on their individual level to participate
to get to
and
this
exercise
point.
their rights. I mean,
Yeah,
let's face it. I mean, communication is probably the most basic of rights and needs for all of us to be able to interact and make choices
right.
and decisions and,
And
and
safety,
all
like
those things.
safety is a
It's
huge issue, right? I mean, in terms of
exactly.
vulnerability.
Yep. Um, and they just, stuck behind and I never did learn the politics behind it, but because somebody must have really been pushing them to stick with it. But they, said, oh, nope, that method does not have an evidence base um, in our estimation, and we will not change our position on it. So
Wow.
I commend the many people, yourself included, who push forward with gaining that for your son and for the people that do that. I think with any methodology at the school level, it can, whether you're talking about the best way to teach reading, the best strategy for dyslexia, any of those methodologies. I think the schools have historically tried to say that's, because the state is responsible for methodology, don't have a say in that. But we push back on that to say, yes, we're supposed to be under the law, and we're given the right to be a meaningful participant in the IEP team. That means our input has to be considered, and there has to be, as the Supreme Court said in the Andrew F. case a couple years ago, there has to be a good reason for the team to say no. And they have to send that to you. They have to send you that information in written form after the meeting to say we disagree with and are not going to do this for these reasons. And then if that's still not successful, then a state complaint or filing for individual due process is sometimes necessary. But if you're if and hopefully it doesn't come to that in each district or for each child, but I think that if people are committed to that strategy, then they need to continue with the fight.
Do you think that kind of strengthening the ADA, even on the state level, with something like a communication Bill of Rights, something like that can be passed in the state level? I know there's legislation, I believe, that's passed the first hurdle in New York, and there's, I think, draft of legislation in Florida that basically says, look, again, this is a fundamental right. Communication is a, and your choice of communication is exactly that, whether it requires a communication partner with the letterboard or whatever it may be, doesn't matter. You think if we were able to get some more of that legislation, then that might help parents and families fight at the district level, whereas it kind of makes the ASHA position statement irrelevant because it's like, who cares what ASHA says? Here's the law. Like, here's what the state law says.
Right. Well, certainly states can always pass something that gives more rights than the federal law. So, yeah, I think that could be an important step. I don't know if you are part of or have communicated with the folks at Communication First, is a national
Yeah, is
organization
that
that Tana.
Tana? Yeah, yeah. I haven't
Yeah,
chatted with her. Yeah, yeah.
and Bob Williams until recently was on their board. I think he just resigned, but he's an AAC user. And yeah, so I think that's probably something that they're focused on. I can't say for sure, but I would assume. But yeah, there's lots of areas where we see things put into state law that gives greater rights than the protections afforded in federal law, and that certainly could seem to be, I don't know whether or how people would gain the support to pass that, but definitely, as I said, for me, I mean, I don't when I see that something is successful with people and they learn and they move forward, and then the argument against it to me seems to boil down to questioning the authorship or the originality of the idea that's expressed. but nobody else has to pass that test,
Nobody.
you
That's
know?
exactly
So
right,
that's,
Denise.
yeah,
Yes.
so that's a civil rights issue right there. They are being denied the opportunity to benefit from everything else that everybody else gets to benefit on the basis of their disability. And I'm not an attorney, but I am.
Right. But you have a lot of experience. And
I have a
again,
lot of
some
experience and a lot of passion and a lot of ideas, and that's certainly one of them.
it just feels like common sense. Like when you talk about ASL, right? Like, you have students who require the use of ASL because of their disability. And there's no question, no one questions their authorship or their competency or anything like, or again, or the integrity of their communication partner, their ASL interpreter. No one does the same for, again, if there's someone with English as a second language. I could go on and on. There's a lot of these other examples, but for some reason, again, if they're a non or a minimal, speaker, for all their lives, there's this systemic bias that has to be, there's this litmus test almost that they're placing on them. I
Yeah.
mean,
Prove to us that you're communicating your own original thought.
right.
That's,
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like this crazy circular logic that like, how do you prove it? And again, I don't understand the logic behind it or the motivations in a lot of ways. It's really maddening, but that's why we need you and organizations like yours and other advocacy groups. Do you have suggestions for how, like, on a local level or not, but how advocacy groups and families can work together even more to push for reform or push for change or push for these rights?
yeah. So, I mean, I think that we often talk about just being able to succinctly tell your story and tell why this is important to you and to your child, or why, and or them be able to tell why it's important to them themselves if they can. But then also be able to know the statistics and to broaden it to the rest of the community. So how many other kids does this affect? Or, and then
Right.
beyond that, are there other kids with communication issues who don't have that same exact communication issue, but might have something related to it, like I said, like reading, or, I mean, just being able, you can't really uh, be functioning in a society with and make decisions and all that if you cannot read or speak. It's very difficult to, let's just say, without some level of support. So really just trying to find others beyond your community who share aspects of it or have a interest in that same level of right, and then finding somebody to champion it, who at this in your legislature, in your town council, wherever you might want to be directing that change to, and get them to support you. But then, and then the hard work of talking to people and really trying to get collaborators.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. All right, Stone made his appearance. Okay, so one of the things we had talked about was one of our segments that we like to do is fact or fiction. We've got a little kind of a cue, a little jingle first, and we're going to play that. And I think you may have like a fact or fiction to share.
Get QuickTime ready, and here we go. This is Autism Fact or Fiction. We're breaking down what's real, what's rumor, and what might surprise you. Let's go.
All right, Denise, what do you got for us with autism, fact or fiction? Or maybe not autism, but just fact or
Well,
fiction.
there's certainly a lot of fiction going around that disability rights are partisan, or only liberal Democrats care about it. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Disability affects many families in many different ways across this country. The legislation we've been talking about, whether it's the ADA, the Section 504, the Rehab Act, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, they are all bipartisan, and have always been bipartisan. So it doesn't matter what state you're in, whether you're Republican, whether you're Democratic, Independent, or something else. Talk to your elected officials, talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, and make sure they understand the importance of disability rights, of inclusion, of equity to you and your family.
That's great. That's great. It's not a blue or red issue. I mean, it's not,
No,
we're talking about rights here. We're talking about individuals, their lives that are dramatically impacted by these steps and these opportunities. We're just, asking for opportunities that should be their right. So I love
yeah.
that. I think we have time to do our tip of the week. So we've got another little jingle we'll play there.
Hey parents, gather around, it's time to speak. We're here with your tip of the week. Strategies and wisdom just for you. Autism parents, we know what you go through.
All right, it's time for our tip of the week. And like I said, I kind of sprung this on you, Denise, as we started. So I don't know if you have a tip of the week you want to share. If not, I have one of my own.
Well, just one tip I can easily share, which is to do you, be you, communicate what you need to your elected officials. If you're concerned about what's happening, let them feel that concern. If you're in pain over the loss of some benefit or something that's happening, make sure they know that too.
That's great. And I just kind of build on that. My tip is to advocate, to get involved. I know it's hard, again, coming from one who's been in the trenches and still am in the trenches in so many ways. I know that you as a parent feel so many demands on a daily basis, and it's hard to load one more thing. But remember, like, if you don't do it, chances are no one else will. And it's, it's worth it. It's worth that fight. It's worth the effort. It's worth the energy. And particularly now, as we talked about earlier, there are so many resources, organizations that you don't have to go it alone, but you have to take the step and realize that these are fundamental rights you're fighting for your children. And collectively, as Denise said earlier, we can make a difference if we use our voices and push back against some of the things that we're seeing.
Absolutely. And I think that that is so incredibly important because, the future depends on us. We have gotten to where we are on the backs of other parents who stuck their
Yes.
neck out and got us,
Yep.
and students and individuals like Judy Human who, laid down on the steps in front of
Right.
buildings in DC to get the 504 regs passed. If anybody hasn't watched Crip Camp, I highly recommend you do so. But, and so we are where the protection of rights comes from. And I feel eternally optimistic about that because of the passionate people that I meet each day, people like you, David, who, spend your time getting the word out and helping other folks. Students, we're in our fifth generation pretty much of students that have gone through with supports
Mhm.
through the school system under the current law. And we're encouraging people to. The end of November is the 50th anniversary of the IDEA. We're getting a federal proclamation. We were going to have a big celebration in DC, but we can't do that right now because the government's shut down. But we're still going, encouraging people on their local
S-
levels to
Celebrate. That's great.
celebrate, speak out,
Yeah.
let people know, yeah, do we have a ways to go to fix it? Of course. Do we have room to improve? Yes. Are there ways we could fix some of it? Of course. But let's celebrate what these rights and the knowledge that we've gained about how to support students with disabilities have given to countless individuals and families across these last 50 years.
That's great. I love that. And I love the reminder that we are in the 50th anniversary. That's great. I wasn't aware of that. I'm going to use that myself loudly out there in my social media and in our circles. We can use this as a springboard. Before we wrap up, I'm just curious, Denise, what's on your agenda for 2026, or what's kind of like some of the key priorities for COPA?
Well, we're going to continue to push for a strong Department of Education to oversee the law and to provide technical assistance, and of course, continue to push for more funding to serve greater numbers of kids that need it. We have been doing a state and local training academy that we just finished the first cohort of, and we're going to repeat that in 2026 to help people learn better how to make change at their local levels. And last but certainly not least, we are continuing the push for federal law to ban seclusion in public schools and significantly limit restraint. We have seen some positive movement in some states like Maryland that has banned seclusion in all public schools. But
Good.
but we've also seen some horrific numbers coming out of states like New York and Pennsylvania, where the numbers are in the 20,000s, 20 some thousands a year of incidents of students being subjected to this. And I'm
That's
fairly certain,
horrifying.
yeah, I think you know, but I'll repeat for your listeners that there's no evidence base that either a restraint or seclusion does anything to teach students with disabilities. I've been in a situation myself where I had to restrain a student from jumping out of the van on 95 because he didn't want to go to the day program, and nobody would listen to him until he went into to school or to the program the next day and picked up a baseball bat and smashed all the computers in the office. And then they said, "Oh, I don't think Paul wants to come here anymore." And I said, right, he's been saying that all along. He happens to be very verbal and he's been saying he wants a job. So why are we making him wait for some magical day? Let's just get him a job and deal with things then. But so I know there are sometimes where it has to happen, but there's no justification in my mind for secluding a child alone in a room at school. And so we need to pass this federal legislation. We do have, of course, with the shutdown, we haven't been able to reintroduce it again, but we do have Senator Chris Murphy and Senator Bernie Sanders will be introducing it in the Senate, and Representative Beyer from West Virginia or from Virginia, who also I understand, I don't know who it is yet, but he has a Republican co-sponsor, so we will be
Great.
having that introduced in the House on a bipartisan basis. So we've got to get to the point where all our kids are safe. It's the same principle as civil rights are, isn't that it shouldn't matter where you live, how much money your local town has, who you are, whether you have a disability or not. You should expect the same level of safety at school as everyone else.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on that. I was hoping to get into that a little bit more because I know that that's a big part of your work is seclusion. And,
Hmm.
it's an important and difficult topic to talk about. But, you had mentioned that there's no evidence proving, its benefits. You know, the flip side is I think that there's a lot of evidence showing the damage. Like you said, the
Oh,
trauma
yes.
is tremendous, and there's zero reason for it. Like you said, I mean, there are exceptions you could find in any case with any student. I mean, again, we're not even talking about, again, where you have to step in and do something for safety. That's one thing. But how it's become so systemic again in public schools in so many states and districts is horrific. I
Yeah.
have no other word for it because I just don't understand it. I'm super grateful that we never had to face that with our son. He had, plenty of other trauma to deal with, in terms of
Yeah.
dealing with the schools and everything else. So I really applaud your work there. I'm so glad you guys are focused on that because that's tremendously important.
Thank you. And yeah, that's been a passion of mine since I started, even before I started at COPA. We started it, the conversation in TASH many years ago. And, people still to this day say to me, but seclusion rooms are important and we need to keep them because, when kids are out of control, then we don't have to lay our hands on them. They can just be in that room. And that just makes me cringe because first of all, I know that in order to get them into the room, they don't just say, come on with me,
They
let's
don't just
go.
march into the room.
Yeah, let me
Right.
lock you in this room. It's a struggle. It's kids have broken their legs, broken their ankles, hit their heads on the wall. All kinds of things have happened trying to get them into the room. And then when they're totally upset, scared, you're going to leave them alone, sometimes in the dark in a locked room.
It's
I
almost
just, like I
medieval,
said,
right? I mean, it's
yeah,
just,
I mean, I've been in the situation. I mean, we worked with a child in Utah when I was at Kennedy who was, horrifically self-injurious. And, uh, we didn't employ any of those techniques. We didn't have to. And the first thing that any research tell you is you first just have to make the commitment. As everybody keeps saying, well, we need other tools then. No, those tools exist.
yeah.
You need to make the decision and the commitment to use them and move and do it. And that's what, we need that bright line on the federal level.
Well, I think that overlaps with one of our big themes here, and it's something again that I've taken to heart even more so, which is presuming competence.
Hmm.
Kind of across the board, just across the board, that they're just as a society, in education, just everywhere you speak, we need to presume competence because once you do that, once you start treating individuals with disabilities, again, whether they're non-speakers or whatever their disability may be, but treat them with respect, treat them as if they're intelligent fellow human beings and explain things to them. And you'd be amazed at how many of these quote unquote behaviors will change as well. Because,
Absolutely. And I'm going to give a shout out to Ann Donnellan, who was another one of my mentors from TASH, who wrote the first article back in the 80s on presumption of competence. And basically at that point said you may not have the evidence base because what we were just learning and just, beginning on this journey. But in the absence of
yes,
that, still presume this child can learn and presume they have just what you said. And some 50 years later, we have that evidence, but there's still a lot of ableism. And it's
deeply
hard.
rooted. Yeah.
I mean, I myself have been guilty of it with my grandson in that I did not realize the extent to which he's learned to read until he was walking behind me in the mall, reading off some of the t-shirts that were in the
Oh,
window.
that's great. That's
And I
great.
was like, whoa, I know, some of which he should not have been reading.
You take him to
But
Spencer's.
yeah, exactly. We're walking by that store like that, anyways. But so, I mean, and again, I kind of had to hit me in the face again and say, of course, just because you don't see it in other areas expressed all the time doesn't mean that he doesn't have that ability. And we have to keep that first and foremost. And I mean, especially, yeah, around what we're saying to people, what we're saying about people, what we're doing around them, all of that really impacts our kids, and we have to be cognizant of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's great. Well, Denise, thank you so much. Thanks for the work that you do, carrying the movement forward with so much integrity and heart. For listeners and viewers, if you want to learn more about COPAA, you can check them out. It's COPAA, COPAA.org. Whether, again, you're a parent, advocate, someone within the space supporting this community, there's a place for you in this fight. Communication is a human right. Inclusion is not negotiable. I'm David Kaufer, and this has been The Lighter Side of the Spectrum. We'll see you next time.